Hi, Kelly. So nice to have you on the call today. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story with the world, since
Absolutely.
this will go on. So, I'd like to just start off with if you can talk a little bit about your diagnosis.
Yes. So
Right there.
last April, I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. I really had no idea about breast cancer really even before this. I mean, obviously I know it existed, but I didn't, there was no one in my family that had it. I don't have any friends that were diagnosed. I certainly never heard of triple negative. So on top of the fact of being diagnosed and then hearing triple negative and it's rare and it's aggressive, it was, I think, a little bit more scary for me because I had that other element with the triple negative.
Yeah, and so talk to me about what happened after you were diagnosed. So you were diagnosed, and I believe you said it was stage three, triple negative breast cancer.
Yeah, so I had a mammogram and then, they called me back and they told me during the mammogram that they thought they were going to have to call me back because something looked a little unusual, had the ultrasound. I was getting ready to go on a 10-day vacation when they told me I was going to need a biopsy. And that was just so hard for me because I just don't understand how I was expected to go on vacation when they're telling me that, there was a pretty good chance really that I had breast cancer. So I ended up having to wait for the biopsy to even happen. I didn't even have an appointment with the doctor yet. So as soon as I came back from vacation, I went to somebody that my primary doctor recommended, and he did an ultrasound, and I just knew on his face that something wasn't good. So he
Yeah.
said, we really need you to do a biopsy immediately. I remember hearing something like he thought it was triple negative, but I kind of like blocked a lot of things out. But I remember a couple of days later remembering that he said that. And for 1 second, I Googled it and then I saw what came up and I never Googled anything again about triple negative because I knew that it was going to be bad. So I had my best friend who was a nurse kind of do all the research and tell me what I needed to know. So before I
Okay.
even had a biopsy, they pretty much knew that it was triple negative. Um, so I immediately left where I was at and went to the University of Penn because I wanted to be somewhere that was more of like a cancer institute. So I didn't
Okay.
even go to the person that I originally met with. I went to the University of Penn to just, try to get the best treatment possible.
And at that time, what did you know about triple negative? What did you think? And what were your concerns with it being triple negative?
From what I Googled very quickly, I saw that it was the most aggressive and the most difficult to treat. Definitely not what I wanted to keep reading about. So obviously my was concerned and I figured it probably was pretty fast growing because the year before I had a mammogram and I didn't have anything. And then I think my original tumor was 2.5 centimeters. And I did a little research that I think that it doesn't normally grow that fast. So I was putting two and two together. And, I was thinking, oh,
Right.
this is rare. So my, definition of rare, what I was kind of read very quickly was there's no targeted treatment for, or I guess there's no, because it's not hormone fed, you can't do the hormone blockers and those type of things. So it looks like that it grows aggressively and there wasn't really like standard treatment.
Yeah. And so, just a little bit about before your diagnosis, how would you describe your life and who you were prior to this
Yeah, I
diagnosis?
was I mean, very, very healthy. I'm a therapist, so I do mental health counseling with kids and families in their home. I definitely operate normally from a place of like positive psychology. I'm very big on gratitude. I was, prior to this, it really still am now, of course.
Hmm.
Um, I had a really great life. I have a great marriage. I have two healthy kids, a wonderful family, a ton of friends. I mean, I was, there was nothing, that was problematic for me at the time. I did have some family issues that occurred prior to this, which, so when I'm doing research and I'm listening and I'm learning now, I'm thinking potentially that could have triggered something in my immune system, maybe to stop working as well as it did before, because I was kind of like in a fight or flight with something that, something that my brother was experiencing. I was very involved in, with him. He was kind of having like a life-changing situation, and I was helping him. And looking back now, I wonder if that was sort of a trigger for things sort of shutting down for me.
Yeah, and knowing that stress can kind of contribute to it.
Yes.
Did you have any symptoms prior?
Zero. Nothing.
So it just like a Mack truck. You get this diagnosis, and it's like,
And
wow.
once I knew that the tumor was there, I was like, because I didn't really do self breast exams. I would wash myself and kind of feel around a little bit, but not even consciously to try to do a breast exam. Because to me, I figured I got mammograms, and I go to the gynecologist once a year, and they do it. I never really did it. Even once I knew it was there, if I kind of like really felt around for it, I could feel it. But I think that's another thing with triple negative, that by the time you feel it, it's kind of far along, because
Right.
mine was sort of by like the chest wall, which I think that's what happened, the location of it, which is I think how the doctors probably thought it was triple negative, where it's almost like hidden. You can't really feel it
Mm,
unless you kind of feel around for it. So once I knew it was there, I sort of was able to feel it, but before that, I mean, zero symptoms, zero.
wow. Yeah. And so, what was the recommended treatment at that point?
So, so what happened was I tried to get into University of Penn. I sent my images to some lady who was this fabulous lady. I really say she was like an angel to me. Her name was Terry. She was trying to get me into a satellite office. I was hoping to go to the Perelman Center, but you just can't walk into the Perelman Center at University of Penn on a Friday and say, "Hey, I would like to get treated for breast cancer." So I found a satellite office. I sent her my images. She was trying to get me in somewhere else, and this is sort of, I think, where my story goes. Really, it's very interesting because I feel like these little things just kept happening to me that put me in the place of, being able to really get effective treatment quick. Somehow, by the grace of God, the head researcher, doctor at University of Penn, saw my images and called me
Hmm.
and said, I think that you may be eligible for a clinical trial that we're doing
Hmm.
here at the hospital. Would you be interested in coming to the Perelman Center to do your biopsy? And I felt like it was Christmas Day. I said, "Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely." She mentioned clinical trial, and to me now, like, my family was so scared that I did a clinical trial initially. I never thought twice about it. I just followed my intuition. I mean, this woman called me. She said I would be eligible for a clinical trial, or maybe I can help people. So I didn't even know what the standard of care was for triple negative. I found out way after my clinical trial that typically it's like 26 rounds of chemo, and I had 4 in my clinical trial. So I
Oh, wow.
immediately went into the I Spy clinical trial, which was, they do different legs of this. There's a block A, a block B, and a block C. The goal is to conserve the breast and have the least amount of chance of reoccurrence and the least chemotherapy because of the toxicity. I didn't want to do any chemo to begin with. I was getting ready to go to Hope Cancer Center in Mexico. I mean, my friends and family were petrified. I didn't want to do any chemo. But once I
Right.
talked to them, and they said block A was 4 rounds of chemo. And then after that, you get MRIs, biopsies. And if there's no evidence of disease, then you can go into surgery, which would have been my choice between a lumpectomy and a mastectomy. So I said, okay, 4 rounds, I'll do 4, but that's it. So this was offered to me, and to me it was amazing. But looking back now, I can see where people were scared that I was going to do a clinical trial, because people hear clinical trials and think, oh, this is the end. There's nothing else. I actually did one first. So I
Right.
think that was a little unusual. Most people don't do them first. They wait to the end. Um,
Right.
so they told me, I had the biopsy. She said, I think, we think it's triple negative. Before I even left the biopsy, they already had me set up with the research doctors. They had all of my appointments. So before the biopsy came back, I had everything already set up and scheduled. So I was like off and running pretty immediately after I was diagnosed.
And do you know what phase clinical trial it was? Was it a phase
I,
two, phase
I
three?
think two. I think
Okay.
two. Mm-hmm.
And so then you did the 4 rounds of chemo.
Yes, so I had chemo every 3 weeks. It was datopotamab. I believe what they were trying was a new chemo that I think maybe might have been used for like lung cancer or something. They were finding it that they thought it was going to be helpful for triple negative. So and there was another part of the study that I didn't get randomized for that was supposed to be an immunotherapy mixed in with the datopotamab. That was supposed to be that I could have been on the leg of that, which would have been testing the efficacy of the immunotherapy with this new chemotherapy.
Okay. And so, but you didn't do
No,
that.
I didn't. I was upset that I didn't get picked for that. And I remember my I Spy nurse, Will, he was is such a great support for me. He said, really, don't I think you're gonna do fine without it. Apparently when they did my biopsy, they found that I had a lot of tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, which I don't know that they find or they like I don't know that everybody gets the in-depth biopsy that I got because I was in the research study, but they found that I had
Right.
a lot of TILs, and that was like fantastic news. I didn't spread to my lymph nodes, and I had a lot of TILs. So my research doctor was super optimistic that what I did was going, that what I was doing was going to be super effective.
Ah, very nice. So, did you do anything to support the chemo process? Any fasting?
Yes, I did. I was, it's funny because I say what the platform that I kind of go from when I talk to people now was like I was very healthy and I got cancer. So I try to always make sure that people, understand that you could be very healthy and this could still happen. I don't want people to like slack on their mammogram or their appointments and the things they have to keep up with. But I also feel like because of what I was doing prior to really helped it not spread. And I think that helped with developing more of these infiltrating lymphocytes. I was doing like intermittent fasting like for years before that. But when I had a naturopath doctor before that, he's been doing just for a regular just checkups. I kind of started seeing him 3 years prior. So immediately when I was diagnosed, I called him, and he was wanted to give me supplements, some of which my oncologist didn't want me to take because
Yeah.
I was in the clinical trial. And my naturopath doctor was amazing with, he never said to me like, don't do chemo, don't do radiation. He was so supportive. I never felt like I had to pick between one or the other. He just wanted me to make sure I was, doing all the stuff integratively. So he always supported my oncologist. And I love that about him.
And do you know if your naturopathic doctor was trained under Dr. Nasha
So
Winters and had familiar with the metabolic
I don't.
approach?
So it's funny because one of the very first podcasts that I was listening to when I got diagnosed mentioned Dr. Nisha and her book. So I read that almost immediately and then started to try to follow all that. And then when I met with him, I want to say it was somewhere in my treatment, maybe after my first couple of rounds of chemo, I mentioned some of the things, and he said he has definitely interacted with her. I don't think he trained under her, but I think he has definitely been at trainings with her. I think he has spoke with her, and I think he has a maybe his mentor trained under her, but there's some connection with
Hmm.
my doctor and Dr. Winters for sure. I don't know exactly, but he
Yeah.
was like, oh yes, absolutely. This is, the things that that he was recommending were definitely based on the metabolic approach for sure. So
Yeah.
I did do fasting chemo. I fasted like the day before. I maybe it was, let me see. So usually my chemo appointments were like at 1. So I want to say maybe 24 hours from the day before, a little bit after. So I tried to go as long as I could. I tried to go as long as I could, but it's tough. That was hard. But I did a lot of green juicing. I immediately went to started doing juicing. I changed my whole, I mean, I thought my diet was good to begin with, and it was mostly keto, but I mean, I really cut sugar completely, completely out of my diet. Um, I did a lot of visual, like well, I did Reiki. That was one of the first things that I started to do. Reiki, I was doing lymphatic drainage massages. One of the things that I would really do a lot of visualization, like I would after I chemo, and I drank a ton of water. I mean, I was drinking 110 ounces of water a day, prior to this, but always making sure that I had water. I would actually like pee and envisioning myself just like peeing out the cells. And my Reiki lady was like, I would never thought of told somebody to do that. Like that's great.
I
Like it
love.
just kind of came to me that I would just sit there and just sort of try to envision all that happening. I got tons of rest. I mean, I had everybody who wanted to support me. People would say, "What do you need?" And I would say, "Can you make me this? Can you take my kids somewhere? Can you pick up something from me at the store?" So I did a lot of resting. I did a lot of resting, a lot of boundary setting with people, and basically just took care of myself and didn't feel bad about it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we often don't take care of ourselves until something like this happens. And then we feel guilty because, oh, well, I've got to put myself first. And often it's those patterns of not taking care of ourselves that can lead to that process as well.
Yes.
And I say, Naisha will say, or Dr. Naisha, I should say, will say, you don't get cancer if you're healthy. And so sometimes this idea of health, we don't always know because in there's so much confusion out there about what is actually healthy. And the reality of it is if we're not looking at our individual labs and understanding how to read them, sometimes it can be really hard to know. You talked about stress playing a role in it, which that stress can make us unhealthy,
hmm
right?
hmm
What are some other factors that you can look back at and say, I really had to do these things to help support this process? And where are you today with your cancer? So let me just take a step back. You did the 4 rounds of chemo. What else have you done? Did you end up doing the surgery? And where are you right now with
So
things?
I did the 4 rounds of chemo, and it was funny because at the end we had to have I had to have an MRI of, like, they needed to make sure, or they wanted to make sure, that I had no evidence of disease before going on to the surgery, which I ended up getting I got a lumpectomy and 4 lymph nodes removed, just to double check that there was nothing else in my lymph nodes, even though it wasn't there to begin with. And when you go to chemo, they keep trying to schedule you out so that you get the chair, you get the time, and they kept wanting to schedule me after the 4 visit. I said, I'm not coming back here anymore. And my best friend was with me, and she was cracking up because the nurses kept coming in saying, well, we want to do your. I said, I'm not coming back. This is all I'm doing. I'm not going to need to come back. And she's like, you're scaring people, because they were like, well, I said, you could put me in 12 o'clock at night. I'm not doing any more chemo, and I'm not going to have to come back. After the first round, my tumor shrunk 75% after one
Wow.
round of chemo. And I do not think that was the chemo. I really think I healed myself, a lot of it. My friends would call
Mhm.
me and say, what are you doing? I would say, oh, shrinking my own tumor. Like, that's what I would say. I was listening to sound
I
frequency.
love,
And my friends
yeah.
would just crack up laughing. I listened to sound frequency, a lot of sound frequency healing on YouTube. Um, I researched a lot about miracles. I just wanted to which is how I came on to Radical Remission and Radical Hope, which I think are
Mm.
fantastic reads for everybody. Start switching out my products in my house because, I'm thinking that triple negative is probably a lot of environmental because it's not hormone fed. So I did a lot of all that, I did that stuff. So I did the 4 rounds, and they had to make sure that I had no evidence of disease before I went to surgery. So finally, after the
Yeah.
MRIs and stuff, they said, yep, you can go to surgery. So I only had to do block A. I did the lumpectomy and got the 4 lymph nodes removed. And then they called me, like, a week later and said there was no evidence of, it was just a tumor bed. I look back now and I think, why did I even have to get that out? I don't think that was even anything to get out, like, because there was nothing there. But I'm thinking about it now and I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't even need to do that, but I did. But I did. So
Yeah.
they didn't find any evidence of cancer when they did the surgery. And then they did recommend 3 weeks of radiation. Well, first they said they wanted 6 weeks of radiation. And I said, well, I'll give you 3, because I was reading a lot of things that were saying that a lot of research recently is saying that there's no difference between 3 weeks of chemo, radiation, and 6 weeks. So I was like, I'll compromise because I really didn't want it. I mean, I really went back and forth about it. And actually, my naturopath doctor was like, if they're asked, again, if they want you to
Yeah.
do it, it's triple negative. It's, my rate of recurrence would have went up 10% if, I didn't do that. And I wasn't ready for those kind of numbers. So I ended up just doing the 3 weeks of radiation, and I didn't need anything after. I didn't need immunotherapy because I didn't have it before. I didn't need the chemo pill. So I really had very, very limited treatment compared to what other people get when they have triple negative. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to, for those who are listening, just to explain a little bit, really the benefits of fasting with chemo is when you are not eating before, during, and after, just having your water and your electrolytes, you want to make sure you stay hydrated. But when you're doing that, then what you're allowing is the chemo to actually go straight to the cancerous cells, because the cancerous cells will uptake the chemo. If you're eating, if you're giving your body calories and other things, then it loses the ability to go straight to those cancerous cells. So when the chemo goes straight to those cancerous cells, they have the better ability to die off, which is why you saw the 75% reduction, which is amazing. If we can lower the amount of chemo that we're giving somebody by making the chemo more effective
Yes.
and the cancerous cells able to uptake those and die off. And I 1000% believe that the thought process around your cells and your body hearing you saying, I'm eliminating these,
Mhm.
all plays a part of it, right? Our cells are a part of our thought processes. And so that combination is so beautiful.
Mhm.
And imagine the things individually we can do to be able to support the process of these treatments.
Yes, absolutely.
And the thing I will just kind of mention too is in regards to removing lymph nodes. There's definitely two schools of thought on that. If our lymph nodes are designed to filter
Mhm.
toxins and we remove them,
Mhm.
um, the idea would be to clear them out,
Mhm.
so that they get rid of the toxins. So there is two different schools of thought. There's some people that believe remove the lymph nodes, remove the cancer that's in lymph nodes, and then there's some that believe, they're helpful. We just need to get rid of the cancer and then keep them for later.
Yeah,
So yeah,
my lymphatic my lymphatic massage lady, who has also been like an angel to me and I consider part of my team for sure, even though she's not a doctor, was like, "Wait, you need your lymph nodes." And I'm like, I was, it's like you're always in this catch 22, but again, nobody on my team, either team, my standard of care team, medical team, or the holistic team sort of ever said the other team of if like I brought something up, they didn't say that the other person was wrong or don't listen to them. So they made it very easy
yeah.
for me to integrate because there was no pressure. But she just said, "Oh, you need your lymph nodes," but I understand. So I just get lymphatic drainage massages a lot now.
And that's the beautiful thing too. And there's also like those compression like body suits that you can go places and get that. And so there's a lot of things that you can do if you do have lymph nodes removed. There's a lot of tools and resources that can be done to manage that. So not all is lost. There's lots of things you can do, and I don't want it to be triggering for people that have had them
For
removed or for
sure.
you that have lots of options.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
Options.
Another thing I
And
did that I've been working with is got my house tested for mold, and I also was got
mm,
myself tested for heavy metals. And so that was something else that once I was done my treatment, then I started working with my doctor on trying to figure out where it came from, because that's really what I want to, figure out, because I think some of the problem happens where kind of people go back, I think, to their regular lifestyle after, because they're just so happy to be done treatment, and things are better, and
right.
and I have been doing a lot of background work to really try to figure out maybe where it came from.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. Like to being healthy or doing all the right things healthy. You can do all the right things healthy and not see
Hmm.
mercury or not see mold
Hmm.
or not know that these are around us and
Hmm.
on us or in us and causing problems. And so, I mean, I think that everybody who gets diagnosed with cancer should automatically be tested for toxins and for heavy metals.
I'm at, yeah, I had 10 times the amount of mercury that I had a lot of mercury.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had
These things,
a lot of mercury and lead. So right now I'm actually in the middle of doing, I can't remember the detox for it. It's gelatin or something with a CH, some kind of detox.
chelated.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm in the middle of doing
Yeah.
that, but yeah, I mean these things, I have to space these things out and do these things because they do cost money for
Yeah.
these tests, but I'm just so interested now in really trying to figure out, especially because of triple negative. And when I ask my doctors and they're like, I'm like, you can't tell me you have no idea where this comes from. I'm like, but
Yeah.
they can think they can, but I think, it seems to be potentially environmental. And
Yeah.
when I did the terrain, it looked like my highest scores were for environment. So yeah, now I'm kind of working on that type of stuff and mold in my house if there is on, and just kind of testing for all those things.
Yeah. I mean, they're hidden, they're everywhere, and we live in a modern environment, so it's so hard to know.
Yeah.
And I think that you're taking time to do it. So, for anybody that has had cancer, is in the cancering process, you want to detox slowly. And so it's good. When it comes to detox, it's kind of like the tortoise wins the
Hmm.
race. If you try all too fast, you can really actually stir things
Hmm.
up. So, having somebody who can guide you through that process and doing it slow is always the best way to approach that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I would, and the one other thing I want to mention is just in terms of juicing for anybody who's listening to this. One of the things when we talk about juicing, a lot of times we can be very, very nutrient deficient. So, when we start running labs and tests and seeing that somebody's nutrient deficient, getting those nutrients in forms of food, really are extremely beneficial. The one caution that I have with juicing is just knowing your source of vegetables. And I work a lot with Chef Jones Garden out of Ohio because they actually test the residue in their vegetables to make sure that they don't have any pesticides or any ides, right? Herbicides, pesticides, all ides are kind of what are dangerous because they're killing the whatever that is, and we don't want to take those in. Um, if somebody's not very specific about where they're getting their vegetables from and they start juicing and those vegetables have high amounts of ides, then they can actually end up juicing a high amount of ides, right? Taking three cups or even more of spinach that's just
Hmm.
saturated with herbicides and glyphosate and Roundup and all of that stuff is dangerous to drink. So I just want to point that out. And I'm sure that you looked into all of that, but just for anybody, because we tend to just like, oh, mass, let me just juice, and sometimes that can be more dangerous as well.
Yes, and I also did a lot. Like at first, so I, went to somebody who I was buying the juices from, and really had a lot of extensive conversations with her. I also consider her kind of part of my team because she just has been very helpful with nutrition things. And at first, I was doing different types of juices and even like the beet juice, which I like, but then I'm like, I think that's a lot of sugar. So I did kind of try to go towards the green juices, but I would talk to her about all these things as well, and just making sure that everything was coming from a good source. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So hard to, I mean, it's just so hard,
It's a lot.
in this modern environment. We work a lot with the Amish community, and the Amish community doesn't use any of those. However, they're getting high testing on their crops because of the crops around them, and the particles lift up into the air, and they rain, and they dump on theirs. So it's just so hard to know. And other countries aren't as bad as the
Right.
U.S. The U.S. has really, really high amount. So it's definitely a challenge. And so where are you with things now?
So I was done my radiation. And one more thing I'm going to say about food. I feel like
Yeah.
even though I ate really well before this happened, I think my thought process around food has totally changed. So I wasn't like an
Mm,
eater when I was like I didn't like, if I was upset about something, like I was nauseous. I was more somebody, very bright, I'm very bubbly. Like I would go out to eat with my friends a lot. We would, we would go out on the weekends. I definitely massively cut out my alcohol for sure. And I didn't drink a ton to begin with, but I really
Yeah.
drastically reduced that. But I think my thought process around food, like now I eat as a medicine, and as I eat to fuel my body, where before it was like, oh, I'm hung. It just is I can't really explain it, but it's different. And I think be not only my thought process around food or even exercise. I was always an avid exerciser. I've been in the gym 5 days a week, my whole life. But my thought process was like exercising, lose weight, exercising, lose weight. Like I'm doing all this exercising.
Mm,
Why don't I look
yeah.
fantastic? And I don't know whether that was. I think a lot of things contributed to my breast cancer. A lot of different things. But so I completely, and not even on purpose, which I think is amazing. It's like just from reading like Dr. Nasha's book and just having these experiences, I think differently about food and I think differently about exercise. So I go to the gym now because I want to be fit, I want to be healthy, and I want to, I'm
Mm.
not going and going, oh, I've been working out and I still can't fit in these jeans. Like my thought process is totally different. I think that's been a huge help.
Like eating, like food
Yep.
and gym is now for health, not for weight.
Yeah.
And that is how we always look at it. Oh, you're healthy if you're thin,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
I always thought about like, no, 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 I can be thin and still not be healthy. I think what do they call it? Tofu, thin
Yeah.
on the outside, fat on the right. So just looking at that different, which is so huge. I and to some extent, I bet that that's a little bit of relief because now you're thinking about it in a whole different perspective.
Yeah, like I just still, again, especially with again reading about herbs and the sun and everything that we could. To me, it's just like my medicine, and it's how it's my survival. Like I'm eating because I'm eating this, and I want. Like I do still like when I would have cheat days before, it would be like it was my cheat day. So then I would eat everything under the sun. And now it's like if I want to eat something on a Tuesday night that maybe like isn't something I normally would eat, I just eat. I don't have to wait till Saturday in order to have my whole cheat day where I'm like overloading with stuff and like getting sick. I want fruits. I want vegetables. I want good stuff. And I did change my diet as far as like, I mean, taking the sugar out and stuff, but I did really eat pretty good. But
Yeah,
I just feel like I'm satisfied more now. That's maybe what I'm satisfied when I'm eating for my lunch. If I'm eating cauliflower and a hard-boiled egg and some walnuts and tomatoes or whatever and blackberries, I'm like, oh, this instead of like eating it and being like, this is all I had today. It just I feel more satisfied because I'm
yeah,
learning more about how this is just such fuel and medicine, and I'm just more satisfied now when I'm eating. So I think that is like something that I realized only recently that just came to me. I was like, oh my goodness, I like really just have a different perspective about food now. So going back to what you're saying, I finished radiation in November. And I was like fine when I finished. Like I finished, it was the holidays. I went on vacation. And when I came back in January and had my first follow up with my oncology nurse practitioner, I went back to the hospital and just had like this really like, it wasn't like a major panic attack, but I was like, oh my goodness, like this is everything started surfacing for me of all the feelings and things that I had when I was going through treatment. So that was a rough couple months from me, like in the beginning of the year, because I was just trying to adjust to everything. And I was really anxious. I mean, just about reoccurrence, really, just kind of always think about. I tried to join some support groups. Some were okay. There's one I still stay in, but some of them that is a little dicey, because I feel like there's stories and then there's things maybe that work for people and don't. So I tried everything. I went to therapy. I'm a therapist myself, so I know therapy is important, but um, I tried therapy. I wasn't really sure if that was really kind of what I needed. And then just really dove totally into more like researching and just continuing to get as much information I can about what I can do now to prevent, the reoccurrence, how I can change my
yeah,
lifestyle. And I kind of really threw my energy into that with the Terrain Advocate program. And I think that's been more helpful to me than like the counseling piece because I'm putting something in action. I mean, I know what's going on. I have PTSD. I mean, I know that's what it is. And I do pretty well coping with it, but I needed something else. So I feel like really kind of diving into learning and sharing things with other people is really what's been helping me the most.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, what got you thinking about talking to yourselves? Was it something you heard, something you read?
I
Do you follow like Spencer or Bruce Lipton or any of them? What got you going
Like
there?
I said, I operate in my practice and my business from a positive psychology and just sort of I just I just was sort of like inherently, like if you asked all of my friends, they're like, this is like you're gonna go through this like it wasn't like my friends laugh, they're like, it's like a season. You had cancer on Memorial Day and it was gone by Labor Day. They're like of course this is what happened to you. Like it's just my inherent thought process is one of being upbeat and positive and like I'm funny about it. So I just was like I don't know. Again, like my best friend called me and she said that to me. I said, I'm shrinking my tumor. She goes, of course you are. Like, and you actually are shrinking your tumor. She said, that's the best part
Yeah.
about it. Like, you really are. And she was there with me the day the doctor called me and, and said, I can't even believe this, but your tumor shrunk 70%. And she said, of course, because you've been shrinking it yourself since this happened. So it's not something that I started to do, was almost just like sort of a natural funny thing that I kind of just started to do, and I just went with it. And then other things would just come to me, like again, like envisioning sort of when I was going to the bathroom and it was coming out. Like I just think of these things as I'm going along, and then I just go with them. My my kids think I'm crazy, but
Well, if crazy is saving your life, you go be crazy.
yes.
You go be
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. I wish that everybody could do that. I wish that I could do that. I think all the time when if I have something going on, I'm like, all right, envision this going away. It's much harder to do.
Hmm.
It's easy to think, it's harder to do. So
Well, I think it's like
I
anything. It's
think,
like you have to work at. I think it does come. I think it came a little bit more natural to me my whole life. But I do what I try to guide my clients to do is like, I think it can become a little bit more normal for you, to be able to do that. But it's like kind of anything, going to the gym. It's like this, they have to work at things that, well, and you have to buy into the fact that it could work. I mean, some people are like, what do you mean you're, paying out your cancer? I don't even know what the hell that means.
yeah. Well, I mean, think about it, the placebo effect. We all know that the placebo effect is real. And there's all these different things, but it's not intuitive for a lot of us. A
Mhm.
lot of us have lost our intuition in general. And so, yeah, but I mean, I'm glad that you did that, and I commend you for saying that you did that. And I don't think you're crazy at all, but
Right.
your kids are always
Yes, of course.
whatever. So so I always ask this question, on a scale of 1 to 10. And this is really getting at how much has this cancer process and diagnosis changed your life. In terms of quality of life before the cancer diagnosis, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you have rated your quality of life? And then after your cancer diagnosis and now, what would you rate your quality of life?
I probably would have said before my cancer diagnosis that my quality of life was definitely like an 8 or a 9. That's what I would have said because that's what I would have felt like at the time, like was accurate. But now I was actually just in a support group last night where I was saying to somebody, despite having cancer, I'm the happiest I've ever been. I am the healthiest that I've ever been. So beside the little guy in my head that sometimes goes, "Oh, this pain," like, I think I have ear cancer if my ear hurts, or toe cancer if my toe hurts. But besides that little annoying guy that lives in my head, I mean, my quality of life is absolutely a 10 now. And if I can look back, I think it probably would have been a 5. I mean, still only because I just had some things that, I needed to work on, just even regarding like what's important, not freaking out if my clothes weren't put away, and really being present with my kids and my friends and my family is definitely a major change that I made. I was always around, but being really really appreciating every everything everything, and so that's why I think has really been much better for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's such a huge part of it. It kind of forces you to reevaluate things, especially when you know that stress can be playing into it and all of these other factors. And just the realization of what is important.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
And what would you say to somebody who is listening to this and has just gotten the diagnosis and is afraid and they have triple negative breast cancer? Maybe they've done all of the Googling.
Well,
Um,
don't Google is what I would
yeah,
first say. Definitely do not Google anything. Have a trusted source do that. Like I said, my best friend's a nurse, so I would have her read everything, and then she would come back to me. And in the beginning, she's like, "All right, well, there, this is just sort of what it is. There's like she kind of described it to me in medical terms, and that was basically kind of all she said to me. She said, you're gonna go, and you're gonna do what you're gonna do." And she, as time went on, she would maybe mention some more things to me, but to me that was absolutely imperative not to Google anything. And I think things, I would guess, things are really outdated on Google, especially about triple negative, because my research doctor at my hospital, they were like really feeling very positive about all the advancements, and triple negative is getting a lot of funding and things because it was always so rare. So to me, I feel like it's kind of in the spotlight with putting a
yeah,
lot of money and resources into triple negative. Definitely don't Google anything. Definitely rest. I mean, to me, that would like allowing people to help you. I was definitely type A person, never would ask for help from anybody. And I like in an instant switched and let everybody help me. Absolutely getting Radical Remission, Radical Hope, and Dr. Nisha's book, Metabolic Approach to Cancer, for sure, because I think just reading about what you can do, like, handful of blueberries or some, I mean, things that you could really incorporate into your day tomorrow if you read, these books, especially with Radical Hope, Radical Remission. A lot of those things are like spiritual things, going back to church, like, or going back to some type of spiritual connection. So things that are doable. I mean, some of these things cost money, holistic things, but there's also a lot of things that don't. And I think having those books available, it's so hopeful because you're like, oh, I can add this, I can take this out. And to me, again, the research and reading about people that are still, that have survived and have all these radical remissions and, things like that, to me was definitely super important. The hope piece to me is the biggest thing that people should have, or if however they're going to get the hope, to know that there's so many things that you can do, and there's so much going into it. There's time, and so just really grasping onto anything that brings you hope, for sure. But it might look
yeah,
different for everybody. For me, it was researching miracles, but for other people, it could be, something else, and just not being completely petrified of that actual diagnosis, because it looks scary.
yeah. And it's empowering. It's empowering to know that there's something you can do about it. And there are the little things, putting your feet in the sand, which
Mm-hmm.
I know you did, all of those little things that can make a difference. And that is hope. I've talked about this before. I don't know if I've talked about it in any videos like this, but I was at a conference and a roundtable, and one of the oncologists said, I hope is not a tool. Hope is not a solution. And I had a really visceral reaction. Almost couldn't contain myself. I felt like my adrenaline immediately dumped, and I got up and she's, her point was that when somebody gets diagnosed, they could be, close to their deathbed, and they need to just immediately get in for treatment and do it right away, and they can't rely on hope. And I had such a visceral reaction to that, because this fear of we have to get in right away and we have to do these things. One, fear is not a good emotion we should be feeling when we're in this process. And two, my gosh, your cells, your body is hearing that, and he's
Yeah.
hearing that there's no hope. That is not good. Hope is absolutely a strategy.
Hmm.
And the ability to be empowered and to be educated and to know how we can play a role in this cancering process and in healing our bodies is so
Hmm.
important.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of my friends said to me when I was diagnosed, she said, stress will kill you faster than a bullet. And I was like, oh God, that is so powerful. I never really heard that before. And she said, so I know it sounds like it's easy for me to say to you because I had a friend who went through some medical stuff. She said, I know it's like, easier said than done. I'm saying, oh, don't stress out. But I'm not saying, oh, don't stress out. I'm just saying, remember that that is such a key factor and just trying to take
Yeah,
every day, at a time and use your supports, figure out what you're grateful for, try to still be kind of engrossed in things that make you happy and bring you joy. Like, all those things kind of go hand. And it's hard. It's definitely not easy and it's
yeah.
scary, but I think it's that same fight or flight that I think put me into this mess. Was
Oh,
my fight or flight that I was on for 6 months, 7 months.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're in chronic fight or flight, it's just a
Yeah,
constant
so I'm like,
state of.
I'm not doing that again because I think that's what brought me here. So I really was like, I need to, figure out what I need to do to kind of get away from the fight or flight, even in this very stressful moment. Like there's got to be things like you said, grounding, that connecting with nature. I mean, that's it. That was a huge piece for me too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your story and for getting the message out there. And I know we will be continue to be in touch, and I look forward to many more conversations.
Thank you. Me too.